This is the I Hate Football podcast. I am your host, Q. Glad everybody can join me tonight. We're gonna do a little NFC talk, man. Now the draft is over, we're gonna start kind of getting into some of these divisions and talk a little bit about them. What happened last year. What's gone on during the draft and free agency. What I'm looking forward to. Starting in 25 and tonight. I got a good friend of mine, a guy who I've known at this point for a little over 30 years now, and a guy whose show I've been on now a bunch of times. Gotten together with him and some of his buddies on the Finns Talk Sports Network, and really had some good times with them. And he is my boy Will, and he is the host of the 305 Sports Now podcast. And what's up, buddy?
How you doing, man? I'm so glad to be on your show, man. It's been a while, man. It's been a while, but it's a good time to have to come on.
It's been a while, man. I've been over on your stuff here recently,
Yeah,
and
hey, you've been crushing it, dude, man. You were awesome on the I believe it was the third day of coverage on Bobby's
yeah,
show
bro,
on
I was on there.
FTSN,
I was on
and
there the whole
and
day, bro. The whole
yeah,
day.
oh my God, yes, I know, and you killed it also with the East 10th Street Boys over there as well with Alex and Bobby, man.
Had a good time with them, man. Had a good
Yeah,
time with them,
yeah,
chopping it
they're
up, and
fantastic. They really are.
yeah, man, had a good time with them. And man, always have a good time getting together with you, man. On whether it's on your end of things, my end of things. And today we're talking about a subject near and dear to your heart, as everybody can tell by the screensaver behind you, by your backdrop. If anybody didn't know, my guy is a pretty big Miami Dolphins fan, having been born and raised in Miami. Dolphins fan all his life for sure, and figured it was a good time to bring him on, man. Talk about this AFC East and our opinions on it. What happened last year, and get into a little bit of the offseason activity, and and kind of what to expect coming up here in 25, man. So seems like the most natural place to start, right? Seeing as how they are who they are, is the Bills, right? And when you look around at the divisions, across the NFL, Will, and I don't know if you agree with me or not. I think for me, right, when I look around at all the divisions, there's not many divisions that you look at and can really pick out a clear winner, right? If you look at, I mean, let's start in the AFC, right? Aside from the East, you look at the AFC North, right? I mean, you can make an argument for several teams in there, right? I mean, I think most people would probably pick, the Ravens, but you can make an argument, right? AFC West, right? I think the consensus is the Chiefs. I think a lot of people can make a good argument for the Chargers, right? In the South, toss up. Teams
Yeah.
aren't very good kind of across the board. But I think when you look at the AFC East, that is the exception to that, where I think when you look at the Buffalo Bills, what they did last year, what they've done in the offseason, and just kind of the way they ran away with it, last year. I don't know if you can't really say foregone conclusion, right? Nothing's guaranteed, but I think the Bills are as close to a foregone conclusion in the AFC East really as you can get. I don't know how you feel about that statement.
Yeah, I think the Bills are the AFC East champs until they're not, and I just think that one of the main reasons why is because they have a lot of continuity in the team. They're very consistent. There's not a lot of turnover in the coaching staff with that football team as well, and their organization is very patient when it comes to drafting. They draft to the bitter end. You mentioned that on FTSN as well. They draft to the bitter end. They always try to find diamonds in the rough, and they only use free agency to plug in holes, not to make their team better. So I think that's one of the main reasons why the Bills are who they are. Josh Allen was drafted as a project early on. The guy was a steamroller. He had a hell of an arm, but he wasn't very accurate. And because of Ken Dorsey, who was his quarterback coach in Buffalo for a while, kind of honed in his skills. And now he's you can make a case the top 5 quarterback right now in the entire NFL because of his development over there in Buffalo. So until someone can knock him out, the Buffalo Bills are going to probably be the consensus number one team to come out of the AFC East again.
Yeah, I think you said it, man. And again, you start you start with, let's start with the obvious, right? Last year, right? 13-4, right? First in the division by 5 games. It really did feel like, they ran away with this thing. I mean, they ran away and hit early,
Yeah.
right? Especially when you think of what, again, by 5 games, right? When you look at the second place team, the Dolphins, obviously, I mean, they beat them twice. The Bills scored the second most points in the NFL, only behind Detroit. You're looking at a team that was 8-0 at home, true home field advantage, right? I mean, beginning of the year, and never mind the end of the year, right? The end of the year comes around, and those guys, it gets cold, up there in northern New York, and nobody wants to go up there and play. From everything I hear, I've never had the pleasure. I love to go like in September. Definitely do not want to go anywhere near, fourth quarter of the year. I don't want to be up there November, December, definitely not January, February. But again, 8-0, at home, and the season came to end, unfortunately for them, against their bitter rivals and their nemesis, the Kansas City Chiefs, and obviously, the rest is history. But again, a team that had a hell of a year. And I would make the argument, funny because, and I think this, right? My brother, why, no idea, but he's a Bills fan.
Yeah.
And so, I told him, beginning of the year, I'm on, again, on one of the many group chats that I'm on. And one of the things I told the guys in the group chat before the season even started, I told them, I said, Josh Allen's going to be the MVP, and he'll be the highest paid quarterback come into the season. And I'm not Nostradamus, didn't have a crystal ball, but, I kind of hit both of them on the head. I had that feeling. And when you look at that team, really, it's nothing more than one. And you said top 5. I would go as far as to say at this point, Josh Allen, not only because he's the MVP, but I think Josh Allen is the best quarterback in the NFL, in my personal opinion. When you talk about what the team has done and what he hasn't really had around him, when you're looking at, especially like names, right? I mean, again, look at that roster, right? Look at the skill positions. There's nobody there. When you look at their leading receiver, you know who their leading receiver was?
Was it Keon Coleman last year?
It was Khalil Shakir.
Okay.
And he had, I think I wrote it down, Khalil Shakir had 821 yards last year.
Okay.
And he was their number one receiver. Keon Coleman was second, and he had something like 550 yards, right? Their leading rusher, James Cook, 1,009 yards. You know who their second leading rusher was? Josh Allen, right? And so, again, then they had Ray Davis, had like 300 and something yards. And then they had, I think, Johnson, I can't remember his first name. Was the third string tailback. He had like 200 something yards. So they kind of did it by committee, in the running back room. They kind of did it by committee in the receiver room, right? Because, you got like Dalton Kincaid, right? I mean, you had Amari Cooper, who wasn't, really, a lot of people forget he was there with the Bills just because he didn't really do much. Curtis Samuel, you had guys like that. But what he's doing is, right, he's behind a really good O-line, and the skill position guys really are not anything to write home about, right? So that was kind of the way I was looking at it. I was like, I expected the Bills to have a really good year. I expected him to have a stellar year. And because of where I expected them to go and who he was doing it with, I thought, to me, it was just a very natural, pick for MVP, just because, again, just nothing stellar. And nothing against those guys, right? But again, when you look at, Khalil Shakir in the scheme, right, in the grand scheme of if you're ranking receivers in the NFL, where do you put Khalil Shakir, right? He's a slot guy, and again, he's good, right? And they re-upped him this year, this offseason. They gave him a good bit of money. A little bit surprised at the total that he got, but again, they value him, right? They brought in a guy like Josh Palmer from the Chargers. Low key, I think a really solid move. Now you have second year of Keon Coleman. Right behind that line, you have James Cook, right? You had a good stable of running backs, and obviously Josh is always a threat to run, right? So when you look at kind of all those things, and then you look at, the front office, Brandon Beane just continues to make all the right moves, right? I think the scary part for the AFC East, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I think the Bills they were a year early last year, right? And in my opinion, right? Because when you look at, a lot of people were wondering, well, how's this team going to progress, right? When, in the offseason, they let go of, guys like, Jordan Poyer, obviously a guy who mattered, in that defense. Mitch Morse, they let him go. He ended up in Jacksonville. Poyer ended up obviously with the Dolphins. They let go of Gabe Davis, signed a big deal with the Jaguars. right? So you look at what they lost and everything, and you're like, man, are they going to be able to replace that talent, the experience? Who's going to replace those guys? But they ended up doing it because Brandon Bean, continues to draft well and make the right moves in free agency.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. Again, first of all, they have a good scouting staff, so that's number one. Personnel wise, they know what they're doing. They have a very organized office that doesn't play any games. They know their needs, and they're also very physical. Aside from that, one of the main reasons why you don't need a big stud receiver in that offense, because their offensive line is really good. Their running game is really good. Running back committee. You have a quarterback that's very physical when he runs, and he's always a threat to run. So that's one of the main reasons why the Buffalo Bills are where they are. It's continuity. All right, McDermott has been their coach. Seems like forever. You have a quarterback that's already come onto his own. You have a team that's bought in. There's no drama. They got rid of their drama. All right, and sent that person elsewhere. Stephon Diggs sent him elsewhere as well. And their defense is very solid. I think I agree with you. I think once again the AFC East will more than likely, because everybody seems to be in rebuilding mode outside of them, will belong to them. And I do think they could give Kansas City or even Baltimore a run for this year in the playoffs, depending on where they meet. Plus, again, Josh Allen is what Joe Rose calls weatherproof. Doesn't matter where you place him, he's lethal. Whether it's in the sun or whether it's in a blizzard, you're gonna get beat. And I think that's really separates the Bills. James Cook is a stud. All right, he absolutely is. I was a fan of his when he was in Georgia. He's a guy that runs well between the tackles. He's also a guy that can on the edges. He'll kill you as well. And Kincaid is a beast of a tight end as well. I think he's an underrated receiver, but Josh Allen knows where to find him. He's always open, always moves the chains, always keeps the offense going. Gives Josh Allen a blanket as well, just like Kelsey does for Pat Mahomes. So yeah, the Bills. I think the Bills this year again are the strongest team in the AFC East.
Yeah, the consensus, again with those guys, man, it just they just they make solid moves, right? Even if they're not splashy moves, right? You look at what they did, in the draft, and they went in there and they addressed, which is crazy, that the defense was what they recognized as, hey, this is what we need to strengthen, right? They added, in free agency on offense, they added some pieces, but in the draft, they went and addressed the defense, and aside from that, also added Joey Bosa, on the D line, which, again, you're not getting Joey Bosa from his first couple years in with the Chargers, but I think you're getting a guy that when you add him to a line that already has a guy like Ed Oliver, a guy like Gregory Rousseau, and these rookies that you drafted now that you're going to work in, and some guys that are expected to contribute early, man, you can't help but look at that team and just pretty much expect them to pick up right where they left off last year. Again, obviously circumstantial based on what else is going on in the division, but again, man, you have to like what they've done in free agency. You have to like what they've done in the draft, what they bring back, the continuity, like you mentioned. And just it's really hard to put money, against the or put money on the field, right? If you're going Bills versus the field in terms of the AFC East, my money, definitely has to be on Buffalo right now. Just like you said, until somebody, proves them otherwise, until they don't win it. Honestly, man, I think the safe money at this point, would be on Buffalo.
Yeah, and going back to the Joey Bosa signing, it doesn't hurt you. It's only a 1-year deal, so it doesn't really hurt you. Yeah, so if he produces, great. You could re-up him if you want. If he doesn't produce, you're not really committed to him long term. So I think that was a great get by Buffalo.
He was a guy that a lot of teams were in on. I remember San Francisco was obviously wanting to pair him up with his brother.
Yeah.
I know there was a few teams that definitely weren't on him, obviously, because they knew what that deal was going to be like, right? And you knew from the jump it was going to be a contender that was going to land him, right? A guy who's at the point in his career where he's at, and he's made a good bit of money, obviously, and again, kind of a prove it type year, right? Reminiscent of kind of like what Chase Young kind of did with the Niners. Went over to the Saints, signed on with them for a year, and then, they re-upped him. I don't know that I would have given him the money the Saints gave him. But it was, kind of similar, right? Similar, points in their career, even though, Joey Bosa is a little bit further along than maybe Chase Young is. But, a guy who, again, there was a market for him. This wasn't a guy who, just signed, the other day. This was a guy who at the very beginning of free agency, when the Chargers released him, he was, took some visits, and he was a guy who was in demand. As a Niners fan, I was kind of hoping, again, under the right circumstances and the right number, I was definitely hoping they'd be able to line him up on the other side of his brother and kind of, strengthen that D line. But, again, going back to what we were talking about the Bills draft picks, right? Maxwell Hairston, corner they took in the first round from Kentucky. TJ Sanders, a defensive tackle from South Carolina, that took with the 41st pick, a guy who they expect to contribute early. Landon Jackson, defensive end from Arkansas, another guy who was highly regarded, so on and so forth, man. I mean, they really did well in the defense from all accounts. Free agency, they made some low key nice moves. Like I said, I really like that Josh Palmer move. I think that's going to be a big move for them to add what they already have. And again, man, I fully expect them. Right now, their floor, to me, their floor is the AFC Championship. That's how much I think of the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Let's not forget they also picked up Dorian Strong, a guy I really wanted for the Dolphins, in the draft as well. They also picked up Jackson Hawes, who's going to help out a lot in the blocking aspect as well. So the running game is just going to get better with him as well. So they just draft well, at least on paper this year, because you don't know how they're going to pan out once they get in the field. But they look really good, and these rookies look like they could contribute. So like I said, as of right now, I mean, Buffalo is just a team to be in the AFC East. There's no doubt about it. Like I said, every team, and you have to be honest, even though I'm a Dolphins fan, every team is either on a rebuild or a soft rebuild, and the Dolphins are in the same boat.
100%. And speaking of the Dolphins, we'll move on to them next. And again, subject and team that's near and dear to your heart, and has been for basically your entire life, man. 8-9 last year, second in the division. Man, some numbers that you don't want to see, and you don't want to hear from your team, man. Scored 200 points less than they gave up, which is not good. They were outscored by 21 total points for the season. Unfortunately, Tua, injured. Again, what else is new, right? I mean, you hate to say, you don't want to, make light of that or anything, but again, you kind of come to expect that. From Tua, he missed 4 games. They were 1-3 without him. Do you know how many points they scored total in 4 games without Tua?
It was a small number. I think they were averaging like 17 points a game, if I'm not mistaken.
They scored 40 total points in 4 games without Tua.
Yeah, it was really bad. I think the average was like 17 or 14 points.
Well, listen, he missed 4 games. They scored 40 points. That's 10 points.
About 10 points per game. Okay, Tua. There we go.
That is so bad. And listen, you can't only there's so many factors, and obviously there's enough blame to go around. I think borderline malpractice the way they did with Snoop Huntley and the whole deal, right? We different topic for a different time, but again, man, missed 4 games. They scored 40 points in those games total, right? Surprisingly, the defense, even with some question marks, some injuries, I think sneaky good. I think Anthony Weaver did really well with what he had and what he didn't have. Again, I looked up their numbers before we, earlier on in the day when I was prepping and stuff, and I saw they were essentially top 10 in just about every category that mattered on defense.
Yeah, the defense was good. I was actually impressed with Anthony Weaver's first year. The only problem with the defense is that they didn't get a lot of sacks and they didn't force a lot of turnovers. They forced a lot of hurries. That's the one thing they did do. They did bring pressure, but that didn't well, now my computer's acting up a little bit, of course. They didn't just those hurries didn't turn into turnovers, and that's the thing with this team. I like the direction with Coach Weaver, the way it's going. He's probably gonna be a head coach in a couple of years if the Dolphins continue this way as well. So Zach Sealer was a great find for Miami. I will give Chris Greer that credit. Zach Sealer was a great find, formerly of the Ravens. Was a journeyman for a while, that ends up becoming a Miami Dolphin. So that was very good for the team as well. The secondary is very subpar. I'm worried about the secondary again this year. I know they somewhat addressed it a little bit in the draft with drafting Marshall and drafting that kid out of Maryland as well. But again, if the front seven isn't buzzing, the secondary might have some issues, because you're gonna probably end up trading Jalen Ramsey. I almost said Dave Ramsey, the finance guy. Jalen Ramsey.
Post June 1st. I mean, that's got to be on the horizon at this point.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially since you basically said you were gonna do it, and he's not a guy that's gonna be okay, no problem. It's okay. I get it. It's part of business.
You can't walk that back. You can't
Yeah,
walk that
he
back.
will let you know he's upset. He doesn't get along with Mike McDaniel from what's been said, right, as well. And then that's why I wanted Jedi Barron so badly. I'm like, if you're gonna trade Jalen Ramsey, just get a rookie version of him. Jedi Barron plays almost every position. You can line up against anybody in the field. The Dolphins didn't do that. They went with Kenneth Grant. Whatever it is, what it is. You still needed to replace Christian Wilkins, and that's what you got out of Kenneth Grant. So that's the thing with the Dolphins. The Dolphins draft this year, I gave it a B minus the other day on Steve Malloy's show, because I think they hit on some needs, but I think they reached a couple times because they could have gotten Kenneth Grant later on if they would have traded down or just waited in the second round. And with a draft so guard and tackle heavy, you probably could have gotten a very serviceable offensive lineman in the draft regardless, even if you didn't get 7A. But I do like the 7A pick. I'm not gonna lie, but I think you could have gotten somebody else as well. So the Dolphins did address not having a big guy receiver. They got Westbrook in, was about 6'2", so to kind of help out at least in the red zone as well. So I mean, we'll see. I still predict the Dolphins will finish second, if not third, because maybe New England would surprise people because they did extremely well in the draft and in free agency.
Yep. Yeah, I think when you talk about the Dolphins, and like I mentioned, Anthony Weaver, right? You to me, start with the defense, and again, surprise, sneaky good. I thought, like I said, sneaky good, given the fact that the offense wasn't great, right? And we all know, the football more than any other sport, right? I mean, they call it the ultimate team sport, right? And every every unit complements the other one, right? And when you're not good on offense, it's going to affect defense, and when you're not good on defense, right, it's going to affect the offense, right? See, the University of Miami football team, right? Great offense, terrible defense, obviously affected, what they did the entire year, cost them at the end, right?
Mhm.
But you look at what the offense didn't do, right? And some of the numbers, man, again, uh, let me rewind. The defense. What I do like about the defense, I like the Kenneth Grant move. If at the beginning of the draft, to me, I thought Kenneth Grant was a better prospect than his teammate who was taken higher
The Mason Graham,
than Mason Graham.
really?
To me, I
Okay,
think I think Mason Graham, and again, may not be a popular opinion. What I think about Mason Graham, to me, Mason Graham just seems like just a guy who like overachieved,
okay,
right? And I think, to me, I think the Browns, for me personally, I think Graham was a reach where they took him. There was 5, right, after they traded with the Jags, and I think Grant ends up being a better pro than Graham.
okay,
That's my opinion. We'll
okay.
see. There it goes. I've been
Well,
wrong before.
no, but it's not a bad take. I'll be very honest with you. I like Jalen Phillips, but I personally would have gone with Rousseau only because Rousseau did not have the injury history that Jalen Phillips had. Number one, and number two, the only reason why Rousseau missed the whole season is because of COVID. He didn't want to play that COVID year, and he still got drafted in the first round because of what he did. That one year, he over had like 15 or 16 sacks. He was only second behind Chase Daniels over there at Ohio State. So I understand where you're coming from. I do think, however, based on like a contradiction, because I just said that we should have waited on Grant. But I do think for what the Dolphins need and the style of defense they play, since they play a 3-4 set, you need that overwhelmingly big tackle. And the guy's 340 pounds. So he's perfect to line alongside Zach Sealer.
Yep.
So I do think he will be a fan favorite. The only thing I was like, well, I would have rather had a corner because you need a guy that could do a little bit what Jalen Ramsey does. And I think you could have waited a little bit to get Grant maybe in the second round. Or you could have traded down, gotten some more picks, and gotten Grant regardless. That's just me, but I do think that Grant will be a stud. I think he's going to play more than people will say. Oh, he's going to play a little bit. They'll ease him in. He's going to be like Christian Wilkins. It'll take 2 years to develop. I thought Christian Wilkins was pretty damn good his first couple of years.
100%. Yeah.
I mean,
No.
I thought he was an impact player.
Yeah.
He drove Josh Allen crazy. Ask Josh Allen who he hated playing against. He hated Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins drove him nuts. So I think that you're going to get that. I think on year one, Kenneth Grant will be an impact player. He's not going to be a sack machine. But he's going to help out in the run, I think, which is very important. Miami was sometimes a slot machine when it came to their run defense. Again, for what the Dolphins need, you need to replace Christian Wilkins. You got a guy that's 340, fits a 3-4 very well. So I understand where you're coming from. I don't think you're crazy to think that about Mason Graham versus Kenneth Grant. I just thought that what he was projected, I thought the Dolphins maybe could have waited and gotten the BPA best player available, which at that time was Jedi Baron.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you, man. And when we were talking about the draft, I was kind of on board with that. I thought Jedi Barron was an absolute stud.
Yeah,
When you look at the measurables, when you looked at the versatility, when you looked at the health, obviously, a guy who was available, which obviously, your best ability is availability. Most of the time, again, when you again Thorpe Award winner, right? The whole thing, a guy
yeah,
who just was a stud, an absolute stud. Played against great receivers in the SEC. Like you mentioned, time will tell with every single draft pick. Nobody knows, right now who's going to turn into what. A fifth, sixth, seventh rounder, could turn into, a star, and there's first round busts all the time. So
yeah,
time
exactly.
will tell. A lot has to do with that. A lot of the, the outside stuff. A lot of the team, the franchise stuff, system, all that kind of comes to play in it. To me, I don't think. Again, looking at Grant, I don't know that he was the reach necessarily that I think maybe some people, feel like he was. I don't think he was. You look at where he went. Could they have traded down? Possibly, right? Maybe. And he may have been there. How people, in teams, man, they set up their board. On some people's boards, Jedi Barron was higher than Kenneth Grant. On their board, Kenneth Grant was higher than Jedi Barron. They went with who they thought was the better pick at the time. And again, time will tell, and we'll see how everything works out. But again, man, I like the Kenneth Grant pick. Obviously, you had to replace Wilkins, who ended up with the Raiders. Didn't have a great year. Obviously, was hurt. But I definitely think they missed him. Right now, what they didn't want to do is pay him what the Raiders paid him. That's what he was looking for. He was looking for a
Yeah,
payday. They didn't re-up him early, which again, a different conversation for a different day. Greer and that whole jazz. But he ended up being too expensive for them. The Raiders, thought he was worth it. They gave him a ton of money, and here you are now in the draft having to replace him. But again, I like the pick. We'll see how that turns out. I think you have to like the front seven. Again, speaking of defense, I think Anthony Weaver has a lot to work with. I think when you look at what you've got up front, I think Sealer, obviously, what you get from him, the consistency, the leadership, the whole deal. A guy like Kenneth Grant, who you line up next to him, you still have Bradley Chubb. We know what he can be when he's a little bit long in the tooth at this point. But a guy who, if he's healthy, is going to make an impact. You got Jalen Phillips on the other side, who when he's healthier, he was on. He was definitely on a good trajectory. And unfortunately, got hurt again. But he was really looking, like he was kind of ready to take that next step and kind of be in contention for for a big payday
mm-hmm.
in an extension. At linebacker, again, I don't know how you feel about Jordan Brooks. I think Jordan Brooks is a really good linebacker.
Yeah,
A guy who's gonna rack up the tackles and everything. I think their big question, truly, is going to be the defensive backfield, right? The back end, especially once you get rid of Jalen Ramsey, who everybody assumes is going to be gone. Again, I don't think that's a situation that's that's going to be fixed. I don't think you Jalen Ramsey is going to allow you to walk back. This, we're going to mutually part ways. I think in his mind, I would imagine that that he's done. Like I've always said, it's easy to get rid of somebody, right? What are you going to replace him with? And Jalen Ramsey may not be a top 5 corner in the league necessarily, but a guy who's still playing really well. Obviously, a guy who you shouldn't have extended when you did. Kind of still boggling that Chris Greer decided to do that. Only hampers you more. Hampers your cap situation, hampers you in terms of trading him. But that's the big question to me. I don't think the Jason Marshall draft pick addresses the weakness that you have on that back end. Again, especially when Jalen Ramsey's not in the room anymore.
Yeah, I was not a fan of the Marshall pick. I thought that the Dolphins could have done better picking up Strong. Um, from what I understand, Marshall wasn't very consistent, anyways, when he was at Florida. 5-star kid though, he was a beast coming out of high school.
Very highly recruited.
Very highly recruited, yeah, but he didn't pan out. At least in the Gator system, he didn't pan out like what everybody expected him to be. So I'm not very sold on that pick at all. To be exact, you're likely to get Marshall, Storm, Duck,
Cater Kohu,
and Sam Smith, who can't seem to get in any defensive coordinator's good graces. Because first, it's a Fangio problem. Fangio, he's too old and stubborn, and then you bring in a younger guy, he can't stand him either. He can't get on the field either. So the Dolphins really messed up scouting that young man. as well. There's conversations about bringing Rasul Douglas. They haven't signed him yet. We'll see how that goes.
Heard
And so
about
that will
that.
be an upgrade in your defensive backfield. They let Jawan Holland go, so that's a factor. They did sign some guys though. They did sign. Let's see. I'm looking at the free agent board here for the Dolphins. They did sign. Yeah, Fatu. I can't say the guy's name. The former defensive back from the Lions.
Yep.
Yeah, they signed him. He probably won't get that much run. He's going to be a rotational player as well. But this side, Ashton Davis, he was pretty solid. So that might be actually a pretty good pickup. But again, like we've talked about, you draft your guys, develop your guys, you sign your guys, and the Dolphins just don't do that. They're very heavily reliant on free agency. Using another college football analogy, if you're way too reliant on the transfer portal, you may have one good year, but you're sacrificing one good year to have a decade of mediocrity. And that's what the Dolphins have done. The Dolphins let their young players that are good players go, and they have 2 decades of mediocrity. It seems so. That's where we're at. But I agree with you. The defensive backfield is going to be terrible. The front seven is going to do a lot. The front seven is responsible for making sure they clog the running lanes, and the front seven is going to make sure that they create turnovers. If like I said, if Phillips and Chubb are healthy, fantastic. Chop Robinson is excellent on third and long situations. He showed, I think he had like 6 sacks in 4 games, something like that. He went on a bit of a tear last year towards the middle of the season. On 3rd and 14, 3rd and 11, that's when you send in Chop, and Chop has a high motor. He's very difficult to block. He's a good first step. He's got good hands. He'll get to your quarterback. So they're gonna be very dependent on those guys to make sure they carry the defense. Yet again.
Yeah, the Ashton Davis move, I like. I think that could prove to be a decent move. Only really 1 year that he's started, but again, I think potentially, I think you have something there, and in Ashton Davis, Tyrell Dotson, some stability, I guess, as a veteran.
Yeah.
KJ Britt, they brought him in on a 1-year deal. So not huge. Artie Burns, they signed Artie Burns too. Forgot about that one coming back home. Willie Gay, but again, these are all 1 year, kind of stopgap, type guys. Guys that you just don't expect to be there, for Super Bowl in time or contribute. If they do, like if they contribute, it's a pleasant surprise. A guy like Javon Holland, like you mentioned, man, a guy who I think had declined some, and I don't think the Dolphins wanted to pay him. I think what he was looking for, the Giants stepped up and they paid him. I think you pair him next to Xavier McKinney. I think I'm sorry, Xavier McKinney's gone. I can't remember who else they have over there at safety with the Giants. But again, a guy who's good, right? Not great, but I think a guy who diminished a little bit. Wasn't as good as he was kind of the previous couple years, but a guy who probably would have helped, this safety room had he stayed, is what it is. It couldn't come up with a number, and he's gone. But again, man, I think the defense, the front seven is definitely going to have to carry the load for this team when you're talking about, the actual defense. Man, you switch over to the offense, man, and again, some numbers that you don't expect, when you have Tua throwing to Tyreek, Tua throwing to Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, 18th in total yards, 22nd in points per game, 21st in rushing yards per game. Just numbers, man, that you just don't expect. Now, I didn't expect that, from a Dolphins offense, right? And I think, and I don't know that you would push back on this. I think aside from Tua being healthy, which is the key to everything, right? If he's healthy, you got a chance, to do something, pretty big on offense. But you look at the offensive line, and the offensive line, clearly some issues. That was before Teron Armstead retired. I mean, you had issues there already. So don't know how you're feeling about the offensive line, but I think there's definitely some cause for concern there if you're looking at some of these names and what the potential starting lineup is going to be.
Yeah, if James Daniels is healthy, he could be effective on that left side. So center's pretty good. Not the best run blocker Brewer is, but he's great. He's great in pass protection. That's one thing, and on screens. The right side is probably be better this year because you'll have Austin Jackson playing right tackle, and then you'll have Savannah. Savannah is going to start over Eichenberg. But if Daniels isn't healthy, you're going to have Eichenberg as left guard, and that's not a good sign. The jury's out on Patrick Paul. He was the backup to Teron Armstead. Let's see what he learned from the guy. He was drafted as a project out of Darren Hokerson's area system over in Houston. So let's see how he does in
Yeah.
tighter sets versus the wide edges that they played over there. So we'll see what happens as well. But again, I do think they'll address the line again next season as well. It's going to be more, they'll pick more on the offensive line. But the Dolphins made it known that they want to be more physical, and that's why they picked up Samanea, and because they want to be a more physical team. So we'll see. And they picked up Ollie Gordon because they want to jam it down people's throats. So um, I think it's going to be a mediocre offense. Tyreek's lost a slight step. Tua's lack of arm strength kind of hurts them when they play a too high set, forces everything down the middle of the field. Hence the reason why the tight end was such a pivotal part of the offense, which it wasn't in the 2 years prior under McDaniel. The tight end was virtually invisible in the passing game. Well, since they decided to go too high, he took what the defense gave him. So John Smith ate a lot as well. So big concern is Tua's health. Tua can't get hit. I mean, he just can't. That's just his thing. And I love Tua. I love the work ethic. He's a great teammate. He's a fantastic leader, but he's too injury prone. He's way too injury prone. So the Lions gonna have to really step up, or you'll just have to work on a game where he gets the ball out quicker, as well. So Devon Achane says something funny, in a quote. He said that keep the receipts for all of us that call us soft. I'm like, well, okay. I'm the nicest guy to my teams. All right. I try to be critical, but in a very constructive way. Even I'm saying the team is soft. Where you're 4th and 1 and you have to feel like you have to pass the ball because you can't get 1 yard. You can't get 1 yard, lowering your shoulder and driving in with your lineman. That's a problem, Q.
It's
Okay,
hard
that's a
to
problem.
argue. It's hard to argue the soft narrative when you're passing it on 4th and 1.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get Q. Listen, man. Again, I'm gonna use UM as a reference. We were so physical. The Canes were so physical this year that Cam Ward told the Bulls at USF, "I'm gonna run it right here, like this gap right here." Guess what? Up the gap, touchdown. I think it was Martinez ran that one in, and that's how confident and physical the Canes were. The Dolphins are not that team. And going back to the Bills, every single team that has made it far into the playoffs, Q, whether it's the NFC or the AFC, the one thing they have in common is that they're all physical teams. They all know how to get 1 yard. They all know how to run out the clock. They all know how to beat the hell out of you when they have to. They'll finesse you, but they'll beat the hell out of you. And that's something the Dolphins do not have.
No, they again, the offensive line, right? Just like you mentioned, right? Patrick Paul being the replacement for Teron Armstead, a guy who, just like you mentioned, I think project is probably where the hits it on the head. A guy with traits, a guy who's tall, long arms, but a guy who definitely, was somebody who you didn't expect to come in early and really make an impact. And now you're counting on him to possibly start at left tackle. I think at this point probably a little bit concerning. You hope that he's developed and is ready to take that next step. But a guy who from what he showed last year, can't make you super comfortable. When you got him protecting your franchise quarterback. So, again, the O line is a must for for a lot of reasons, right? The biggest thing is a run game is Tua's best friend,
Yeah,
right? When you look at what they're hopefully able to do. He's best when he can play action, and you can't play action, without an O-line, opening up holes for your running game, right? The running game has to be a threat in order for your play action to be a threat.
exactly.
A lot of the stuff that they mentioned, obviously, going back to that soft narrative, right? When it comes to the Dolphins, and sitting here looking at their schedule, and they kind of get lucky, for the most part. With their schedule, when you're talking about cold weather games, I'm looking at, again, for most of the country where, October kind of starts to become, pretty cold. They'll be at Cleveland October 19th. So that shouldn't be, too terribly cold then. Obviously Falcons are indoors. Then they play the Ravens October 30th, but they have them at home.
Mm-hmm.
Next time they go on the road, they'll be at the Jets November 30th. Obviously weather will probably play a part then. The Steelers December 15th. That'll definitely be a cold game, I'd imagine, and then January 4th at New England. So again, they've just like every year. I mean, they're gonna play some cold weather games, and then that's kind of really where you see what this offense, tends to turn into, and they go from the NASCAR package to to the NASCAR kind of sputtering a little bit,
Yeah.
in that cold weather. So, we'll see if they can turn things around this year, man. I think it's going to be an uphill battle, against the Bills. But luckily, for them, they've got two teams with new head coaches, and the first one being the New York Jets, man. Team that last year was 5-12 and a dumpster fire the entire year. I don't think is a stretch.
Uh,
Just headlines for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers was just a soap opera. The expectations, coming in were sky high, based on Aaron Rodgers, based on the roster, based on, what you had in Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall. You had Devontae Adams last year. You had some really stellar dudes on defense, but all of it, man, all of it was just a complete dumpster fire. From the owner Woody Johnson, who just meddles and everything. Down to Joe Douglas, to everything. And again, man, I've told you, and my opinion on all that. When your ownership is solid, when your front office is solid, and when your quarterback is solid, you've got a chance every single time. And with the Jets, owner meddles. Joe Douglas, he hit on some guys in that a couple years ago in that draft, where he landed Sauce and he landed Jermaine Johnson and he landed I think it was Elijah Vera Tucker, if I'm not mistaken. But really just he let Aaron Rodgers essentially sign whoever he wanted, Alan Lazard, and these guys really who were I don't know why the hell you're signing him. Robert Saleh, I think, again, loved him. He went back to the Niners, so I'm happy about that as a Niners fan. But a guy who I think was a little bit over his skis as a head coach, a guy who I think they put too much stock in Aaron Rodgers, a guy in Jeff Ulbrich who was supposed to be, a guy who highly thought of DC. The defense wasn't that great. So, man, just a lot to look back on in 2024 and question, what they were doing, and really not super surprising that they made the changes that they made.
Yeah, I thought they would be better, to be honest with you. I think, and I still feel this way. I do think the Jets are going to be better this year than what people think they will be. Like, I was a big Aaron Rodgers fan before he went crazy. I was a big Aaron Rodgers fan. He was always my first pick of my fantasy draft. He always gave me some solid wins. Father Time picked up. He had a really nasty Achilles injury, and it showed. So that's the thing with Aaron. Aaron was way too much. Listen, the one thing is that you don't want is too much drama. Like, you really don't. And there's always drama with that football team, and that was a problem. If you look at that team on paper, they're supposed to be pretty good. Brees Hall is a very good running back. Okay, you got Garrett Wilson, who's a very good wide receiver. You have Sauce Gardner, who's a very good defensive back. That team is built to at least be competitive, and it just wasn't competitive at all. I agree. Robert Saleh was way over his head. That team was very underprepared whenever they faced good teams, including the Dolphins. They were always very underprepared as well. It wasn't a very cohesive team. Aaron Rodgers did whatever he wanted, including getting his own offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. That didn't work out very well for them either. As well, it didn't work out for Devontae Adams either over there in New York. Nothing worked for that football team. They have they did draft, I think, on paper decently. I do like the
Very
kid
good.
with the OT from Missouri, Armand Membu, yes.
Yep.
Mason Taylor, that was a pretty good pickup as well. They're giving Justin Fields another weapon. Azarian Thomas from Florida State. Florida State was bad, but their defense wasn't terrible. So I think
he was one of the bright spots of that team.
Yeah, he was, and so is Joshua Farmer. I think he's going to play very, very well. Mm-hmm. The one concern is that they drafted Arian Smith, and according to you, the guy couldn't catch a cold.
Bro, that guy legit can't catch a cold, man. Like, if it's a track meet, if it's a track meet, I want Arian Smith on my side because the dude can run. He can run. But I am telling you, when you look back on Carson Beck's, film from last year, like, left and right, you see Arian Smith just not being able to catch anything.
I was going to ask you, so Carson Beck had about 500 yards with the drop balls. Mm-hmm. How many yards did Arian Smith account for?
I think he accounted for the majority of it. Him and Bell was, I think, the other kid who was good, but also drops the passes. Yeah, but but Arian Smith was the main culprit of that. I mean, he would get behind defenders. He would get
Yeah.
behind defenders, but I am telling you, listen, if he got back most of those yards, like Carson Beck's numbers would have looked that much better. But
Yeah.
Arian Smith did him no favors when you when you talk about Carson Beck, man. I mean, he which and it was shocking. It was just shocking to for a team like Georgia just to not have anybody else you can march out there to do better than that guy. But yeah, man. I mean, again, going back to what you were talking about, man, with their draft, they brought in their new GM, and his name escapes me, but they brought him in from Detroit. Him and Aaron Glenn obviously have some history
Yeah.
there. So he brought him in from Detroit, and you could tell, I think on paper, like you mentioned, at least early on, you really have to, feel like, that hire is paying dividends. When you look at the draft they had, you got to assume that Armand Membu, on some level reminded them of a guy named Panay Sewell,
Yeah.
that they had at, Detroit, a guy who's going to play right tackle. I would imagine literally from snap one, he's going to be there. I think he's going to be a fixture as long as he's healthy. I think a guy who, the athleticism is off the charts. A guy who was possibly the best tackle period.
Mhm.
In the draft. Forget about right or left tackle, just the best tackle period. Mason Taylor. A lot of people assumed that they were going to go tight end round one and then go tackle round two, but they passed up guys like Colson Loveland, like Tyler Warren, from Penn State, and instead win Membu round one. They made Mason Taylor in round two, who I think a lot of people, low key, are praising that move, because I think Mason Taylor is a legit tight end. He didn't have the fanfare that the two top guys had, but I think a guy who they're not going to be disappointed in. Like you mentioned, Azaria Thomas from Florida State, who I think will probably contribute, really early on. Malachi Moore is another one, man. Malachi
Yeah.
Moore, a safety at pick 130, a guy from Alabama who I think has some versatility. I think a guy who's probably going to contribute early. And then two guys that we know well, right? Francisco Manoa, linebacker from Miami, and then Tyler Barron, defensive man from Miami. So, I think you got to like what they did in the draft, man. I think, they're a really interesting team to me, man. I think when you look at what you're going to the line that you would imagine is going to be better this year, and they got some dudes on that line. I think they were old, especially at tackle last year, which didn't help. Aaron Rodgers, Morgan Moses on one side, you had Tyron Smith on the other. Guys who obviously way past their prime,
Yeah.
pretty much in their mid 30s. Big time injury histories, I think, with both of them. But I think Elijah Vera Tucker coming back healthy this year. You line them up, with on the same line as Membu. Again, you have Brees Hall, running behind hopefully a healthy line. And then, man, Justin Fields, when you look at what potentially they have as a running game with Justin Fields, I mean, listen, man, if you protect that guy and you're able to run the ball, I think they're really interesting, man. I think they're a
Yeah.
really, really interesting team with Justin Fields. Is he my favorite quarterback? He's not. But I think I'm really interested to see. They brought in the OC, again, another guy from Detroit. He was the passing game coordinator in Detroit, and I wrote down the things I had never heard of him. His name is Tanner Engstrand. I had never heard of him,
No.
but they brought him over from Detroit. He was a passing game coordinator over there. Never been an OC in the NFL, but really interesting the dynamic and how that's going to look, right? Because you came from an offense, where you had a guy who's the definition of a statue in Jared Goff, to now coming over, to a guy like Justin Fields. Obviously, I mean, literally, you can't get more different when you talk about quarterbacks. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what he does with Fields, and then he's got talent around him for sure. The skill position guys, I think, are a talented group. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that goes there, if he can maximize Justin Fields. But and then on defense, Steve Wilkes, they brought him in at DC. A guy, super highly respected guy who's been around. He's been a head coach, in Arizona briefly, unfortunately just for 1 year, but a guy who is a highly thought of guy. So some interesting moves with the Jets, man. And I think, again, sneaky, better than last year. And again, it won't take much, because again, when you talk about 5-12, I mean, again, you can't get much worse. But a team that, I think given the change in just everything, right? The change in system, the change in mentality, the circus has left town, right? The Aaron Rodgers circus is gone. A guy in Aaron Glenn who I think is probably a little bit more prepared, at this same time than Robert Saleh was. Steve Wilkes is a no nonsense guy. He wasn't the rah guy like Ulbrich, who's cussing up a storm and love the hot mic to be able to scream into and everything. But I think very very just toned down type of offseason, even with all the good moves that they've had. But I think just a more competent staff in the front office, a more competent staff on the sidelines, I think will make this team a tough out, right? I think this is a team who, again, I'm not expecting to make the playoffs or anything, but this is a team who I think can win 7 or 8 games because of what they're going to be able to do on the ground and on defense.
Yeah, I think so. I think 8 wins. But I wouldn't be surprised if winning 8 games. All Justin Fields is really going to have to do is just make sure that he makes the right reads. Right? Make sure he makes the right reads. Don't hold on the ball too long. Check it down and just hit your open and hit your open receivers, and that's it. And let the defense do its job. I think the defense can be better as well, and I do think the running game is going to help out a lot. Breece Hall coming back healthy with a much better offensive line, I think it's gonna bode dividends for this football team. They drafted well on paper, like I said. M'Boue is a day 1 starter. Mason Taylor is probably that's it. That's your number 1 tight end right now, right, as well. So again, don't sleep on the Jets. I do think they could be an 8-win team this year. So as a Dolphin fan, you got to be careful. You can't sleep on that team.
No. I think, like I said, man, I think that team, again, sneaky. I haven't seen what the over under is in terms of Vegas and what they're predicting, but truthfully, man, I can see that team, again, being a tough out, being a team that's disciplined, that's tough, that runs the ball, and who can give the Bills, the Dolphins, the Patriots, I think a run for their money. And again, I don't think they're going to be an easy out. I'm not predicting them to win the division, to make the playoffs, but again, just like you mentioned, you said 8 wins. Again, I'm in that 7-8 win range when it's all said and done, man. I think Justin Fields will be good in that offense. I think the defense will have a little bit of a resurgence because they've got talent on that side, and I think they're going to be a problem for some teams. Not a team that I would sleep on if I saw them on the schedule. So, and again, along with them, right? We talked about the teams with a new head coach, and last but not least, the Patriots. Not your favorite topic of conversation. As a Dolphins fan and a long and long tormented by number 12. Over there in New England, but
yes,
a team that to me, man, is again, it's another intriguing member of this AFC East. When you looked at it last year, a team that was just devoid of talent. I think Gerard Mayo at head coach, I don't know how you feel about it, but to me it felt forced. Again, I don't think they made it a search that was league wide. I think they went with a very safe pick. He's a Belichick guy, and a guy who, when we talk about, a guy like Robert Saleh and some of these guys, especially when they come from the defensive side of the ball, I think guys who are a little bit overwhelmed, in that role as head coach. And I think Gerard Mayo was one of those guys, right? Just no energy, I don't know, man. And I'm not one of these guys. I don't need my guys to be rah, hot takey, type guys, great interviews in the whole deal. They don't need to be like Dan Campbell or anything like that. But, just show me something, right? And Gerard Mayo just didn't show me anything, man. He was like, you saw his interviews and you're like, this is our coach? Like, what? I mean, just dry, man. Just like, at least Bill Belichick was dry, but at least he was entertaining, right? He basically called you an idiot. You're asking
a question. Way, though. Yeah. And he wouldn't really say anything.
No, he wouldn't, but it was entertaining.
He would mumble his interviews.
Yeah.
Next day.
Let's see how angry Bill Belichick, and that in itself was entertainment. I thought that was entertaining. You know what I mean? But Mayo didn't even give you that. And then on top of that, then they were just terrible on the field. Just terrible, right?
Horrible.
No, nothing to speak of at the skill positions. Ramondre Stevenson, a good tailback. Obviously, Drake May was really their only bright spot, really, for the entire year. But again, a team that, 4-13, good for last in the division. Gerard Mayo fired after one season. I think they righted that wrong with a guy like Mike Vrabel, who I think by all accounts, at least for me, a guy like Tennessee, a guy that Tennessee pulled the plug on way too quick. I think a guy who is a highly regarded guy, a guy who has made himself one of the better coaches in the league, and I don't know what Tennessee was thinking when they fired him. To be totally honest with you, but What's your assessment on the old Pats?
Yeah, well, Bobby has the same take you do. Bobby is a huge Bobby from Always Vince Talk. He's a huge Mike Vrabel guy. He was hoping that if they fired Mike McDaniel, he'd be the guy, but
Alas,
Vrabel.
not to be.
No, no, definitely not. At first, I wasn't sold on him because I want to give Mike McDaniel one more year. I like giving coaches at least 4 years, in general. But he's right. He was more successful in the first couple of years than Mike McDaniel was. At least he won a playoff game for Tennessee. But yeah, Mike is a tough guy. Mike is a Belichick guy as well. Very experienced. Could hold a locker room. Could hold the interview as well. He's a leader of men. I think it was a right hire. They should have hired him from the start, as well. So I do think that it's just something that I think was a good fit. I think it's a good fit for them, and I do think that they drafted very well as well. I think they got an A+. They hit out the park. I think every single pick that they got not only does it fill a need, a void, but it also strengthens the football team from Trevion Henderson to Campbell, the offensive tackle out of LSU as well, to Kyle Williams, the wide receiver out of Wazoo, who played both well with Cam Ward and John Mateer, right, as well. Jared Wilson, whom you spoke very highly of, the center out of Georgia as well. Then you had, of course, Craig Woodson out of Cal. Cal had one of the best secondaries in the country. No one knows that because it's Cal. Joshua Farmer, the D tackle out of Florida State, another good pick as well. Bo Regales, a very sure kicker. So if you're down by one, he's gonna make the kick. So I do think they hit the draft right out of the park. I think they did very well. I think Mike Vrabel walks in a very situation. He's got a franchise quarterback as well. He's got a solid running game, which was helped him out in Tennessee quite a bit. And the Patriots have just become more physical. I still see them around the 8-9 win range, only because I still think Drake May's in development. It's the first year of a new system. But that's a team that's gonna be challenging the next couple of years for the AFC East. I mean, I guarantee it. Once those young guys develop and Drake May plants his feet in the NFL, Mike Vrabel's experience, they're gonna challenge Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. To me personally, I am a firm believer that the Patriots had the best offseason of any team in the AFC East.
Yeah, I agree.
And you have to look at, so much of my opinion on that is tied to what they were last year. And what they were last year is I hate to use the word again, we're going to recycle it, but they were a disaster last year.
Yeah.
They were not good. They were not good last year. And again, I mean, they're saving grace when you look at, with only winning, 4 games. Your saving grace last year was Drake May starting to kind of take that next step, and they showed life because he had a really good kind of last quarter of the year. I mean, he showed well. They didn't win many games, but again, man, a guy whose development you have to really like, in terms of the trajectory that he's on. You got to like. I wasn't super sold on Drake May, but again, man, end of the year, he was really starting to make believers out of some people. Definitely me. But you look at, again, what they did with the hire. First and foremost, I think that was a home run. Mike Vrabel was a home run hire. Then after you do that, then you go in the draft, like you mentioned, man. I think they knocked the draft out of the park. I think they have starters. I think Will Campbell starts day one.
Yep.
I think Trevion Henderson probably starts day one.
Yep.
Who else you mentioned? The O-line. The O-lineman from
Wilson, the center.
Yeah, exactly. Jared Wilson. I don't know if he starts, day one, game one, but I think a guy who's probably going to play a lot and probably come end of the year is a guy who's probably going to be a starter.
I think Kyle Williams is going to play as well.
Yeah, 100%. A guy who's he's definitely going to be, he's going to be in that wide receiver, 3-4, conversation, more than likely, because obviously, Stephon Diggs is, will be the wide receiver one. But again, you have to like what it is that you surrounded Drake May with, right? They had an idea, they had a vision, they had a plan, and I think they executed that. When you look at the draft, when you look at free agency, I think you really, really have to like, if you're a Patriots fan, you really have to be excited about what the future holds. Because, man, again, I think they righted the wrong of the Gerard Mayo draft or a hire. by signing, Mike Vrabel. And I think, man, moving forward, man, again, you really have to I think uh, they brought back McDaniels as the OC, didn't they?
I
Mike
think I
Vrabel.
heard that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
believe
think Mike
so.
Vrabel hired. Yeah, I think he hired McDaniels. So a guy who never cut it as a head coach, but a guy who's proven, that he's a good offensive coordinator, right? And so, again, man, across the board, you start on defense and what they did, and you have to like the free agents that they brought in, dude, Carlton Davis, Milton Williams.
Yeah.
You already have one of the best corners in the in the league. In was it Hernandez that they have on the other side?
Yes. Yes. Chris Hernandez. Yes.
Hernandez, my Colombian brother, right there. Just
He's
FYI.
Colombian.
He's Colombian, bro.
I
He's
didn't know that,
Colombian.
man.
During the draft, like once he got drafted, he did the jacket,
Oh, I
and
see
he
that,
opened
man.
it
I
up and he
see
had
it.
the Colombian flag
I see that.
inside the jacket. Yeah, man. And again, man, a dude who is really making a case for being a top top 3 to 5 corner in the league right now. Again, Harold Landry, they
Yeah.
signed from
He's a Vrabel
Tennessee.
guy. Hmm.
Really good, man. Robert Spillane, they gave 3 years, $37 million. A guy they brought over from the Raiders. Carlton Davis, like I mentioned. Morgan Moses at OT, a guy who's got some age on him, but a guy who can still play, man. I mentioned Milton Williams. They brought in Josh Dobbs to back up Drake May. I think again a guy who if you need him to step in on a short notice, I think he's proven that he can do that. Mac Hollins, they brought in from
Yes.
Buffalo. A guy who who can play. Austin Hooper. Jalen Hawkins at safety, a guy who will provide some depth. Kayvon Chason, who hasn't lived up to where he got drafted, but a guy who can be a rotational pass rusher. So on and so forth, man. I think again, man, they did a lot of good things in the draft, a lot of good in free agency. Biggest move being Mike Vrabel, and bringing McDaniels as his OC to mentor and develop Drake May. So again, man, you look at that team, and as a Patriots fan, you have to be really excited about what they did, the moves that they made, and because now it's really looking like there's direction, there's order, there is competence in that front office. There's competence on the sideline, and like we know, you ruin more first round draft picks than you develop, right? And a guy who you took as high as you did with Drake May, who you take him to be the your franchise guy, in the wrong system and in the wrong hand in terms of OC and quarterbacks coach, man, I mean, you can ruin that kid, and so it looks like they've done right by him through the draft, through free agency, what they surrounded him with. And as a Pats fan, again, I think you really have to be excited for what the future holds with this team.
Yeah, Alonzo Highsmith has entered the front office and has gone running, man. That guy is an amazing evaluator of talent from when his time in Green Bay, his time in Miami, a lot of those top 10 classes he helped Mario pick up his first couple of years, and now he's doing it with the Patriots. And he's very quick, man. He sees a kid, he looks at the kid, takes notes down, and this guy we get, he's very good at evaluating talent. I mean, it's phenomenal. The front office guy he's become, and the Patriots have him. So that's again, it just shows how good he is, and the experience and the understanding of the importance of a good scouting department will get you. Because like I said, I like as a Dolphins fan, I like every single pick. If I'm a Patriots fan, I'm happy about every single pick, including the kicker in this draft. I think the Patriots hit it out the park. That's why I got an A+ on NFL.com.
Yeah, and I can see it, and that was another deal, right? I mean, they landed another starter. Borregales is going to be, unless he just forgets how to kick the damn ball in camp. You have to imagine he's going to be the starter, kind of game one, and so they really just hit it out of the park, man. I think the division really as a whole, when you look at top to bottom, the Bills, Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots, really did well in the draft. They set themselves up with some guys who are going to contribute day one, starters. Time will tell, just like anything, man. But I think a lot of teams that are kind of really interesting for different reasons, and also interesting in that I think the division as a whole, right, for obvious reasons, right, with Aaron Glenn being his first year, Mike Vrabel being his first year. and the head coach of the Bills,
Sean McDermott.
Sean McDermott. Thank you. Obviously, he's got a very steady and very cold seat when you talk about his success. Really, you look at Mike McDaniel; he's the only one that with a warm seat in that division.
Yeah.
Right. You really have to wonder, after this year, if they haven't, progressed and they're not in, if they don't make the playoffs, I think you really have to start having some real conversation about Mike
Yeah.
McDaniel not being the coach next year. You're going to be in year 4 of him, and they haven't really progressed in a manner that that you would have expected, when he came from San Francisco and all the hype and everything coming in with him. I think there's reasons for that, right? Obviously, Tua, has missed some time, and that's cost them, and obviously the front office has a lot to do with some of that. But when it's all said and done, who takes the fall, and it's a head coach.
Yeah.
So if it's another year of not being successful, I think you really have to look at McDaniel's seat being warm to hot, and possibly not being around next year if this season doesn't go well.
Yeah. Well, the way they drafted, it's like no one's on the hot seat. So that's the thing. Barring disaster, I think Mike might be safe. They might want to give him another run. At least the way they drafted, they didn't draft like they were in a desperate mode. Like I said, they didn't get a BPA, in the first round. They got a need, which was the guy to anchor the center of a 3-4 defense. They got really one solid guard, which was Avenea, and then they went the tackle again with Jordan Phillips. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see as well. I mean, I think the Dolphin offense will be a little better, and I'm just hoping that they're more physical. That's all the fan base is asking for. That we don't have to throw on 4th and 1. The need, and that you're not getting pushed back 5 yards because you at least know you can run on the right side and be safe. So that's what I hope. But yeah, I do agree with you. Of all the coaches in the AFC East, Mike McDaniel is the one that has to worry the most about his job.
Yeah, man, most definitely. You need to see some real progress, and I think if they can keep the distractions to a minimum, which that remains to be seen because those personalities haven't gone anywhere. A guy like Tyreek Hill, is obviously still on the team, and he's got the potential to to absolutely have your season just become way more interesting than you want it to be anytime he steps in front of a mic. Obviously, you can't argue the talent, even though you can argue he has diminished just a little bit, which again makes you wonder why it is that they extended him and gave him more money when they absolutely did not have to. But again, another topic for another conversation and another day. But Jalen Ramsey, I think the quicker you get him out of there, assuming that that's still a thing. Again, haven't understood why it is that they want to do that. Given the fact that they gave him more money, but again, there's a lot of things going on that team that give it the potential for it to be more interesting than you want it to be, and not in a good way. I think they have to come out early on in the next season. They have to win games early. They have to give themselves that that padding for later on in the year, for when everything gets cold. And again, man, they have to win games early, because if this team starts off, and I'd have to bring up their schedule again, but haven't really gone game by game and made any predictions. But it's a team that if you start off, if things start off rough, and you're 2-4 or something like that, the rumblings are really going to be loud, and things could get really, really interesting for that team. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Steve Malloy, what's up, buddy? Hope to see you again soon, man. He's saying hi. Excellent analysis, guys. I appreciate it, buddy. I appreciate you chiming in, man. Hope everything's good with you. Hope to get on something with you here real soon, man.
Steve.
So yeah, brother.
I call him the Dolphin version of the truth teller. Like Donald has Bruce Warner, he's Steve Malloy's my truth teller.
Steve is the Dolphins truth teller, man. Hey, listen,
truth teller.
Look, it's okay. It's okay to be honest, man. It's okay to be optimistic, and realistic. Both at the same time, man. I'm right there with you, brother. I'm as big a fan of my team as you're gonna find, but I don't like to lie to myself either. I'm optimistic, but I'm realistic too. So
no, me too, man. Me too.
On
game day, everything bothers me.
Yeah.
Everything bothers me.
Same.
Like, but I'm honest about my team.
Yeah, same, brother. Same. I mean, listen. I'm hyped as hell. Before the game starts, and when the game starts, I'm I'm not that fun to to watch a game with, man, because it's just it's frustrating, man. It's
All right,
frustrating.
but
So
Q, I have a question for you. I have a question for you. Who upsets you more in a game, the Canes or the Dolphins? I mean, or the Niners?
I find myself being more um, frustrated by the Canes,
Yeah, me too.
and I think simply because of the fact that with college there's just so much less room for error,
Yeah, I
right?
agree.
Where in the NFL, if you lose a couple games, right, the season's not over, right? You look at what the Canes did last year. 3 games kept them from the playoff. 3 games in the NFL, you lose 3 games, and you've had probably the
Great
best
season.
record in the NFL,
Yep.
right? You're 14-3, and probably have the number one seed. So that's the thing, right? Is they both, now don't get me wrong, they both frustrate the living hell out of me, but a little bit more so with the Canes, just based on there's just less room for error. That's really what it amounts to.
Yeah, no, same here. The same here. Courtney asked me when I was on her show. She's like, "Oh, but your team is the Canes. You're more of a Canes guy." I go, "It's just that losing one game destroys your season.
Hmm.
Especially if it's a conference game, it destroys your season. So I mean, like this year, Miami picked the worst year to lose a couple games because Clemson only lost one game in the ACC. So it was a bad year to be a semi decent in the ACC, because sometimes you can lose 3 games and you might take the coastal, but this year was like there's no room for error at all for Miami. So I think that's the main reason why. But the Dolphins, you lose 3 games, you're still first in the East. We're in good shape. So I don't get that angry. But when the Canes lose it, it's tough. I remember yelling uh at 2 in the morning because of the Cal game. What are you guys doing? I don't get like that with the Dolphins.
I was I was at work, during that game, and they were just they were absolutely wetting the bed, and I was like, you know what, I'm not staying awake for this trash. I'm I'm going to bed because I know I'm gonna get woken up here in a not too distant future. I'm gonna try and get some sleep before that happens, and I wake up, a few hours later, to my phone, a million text messages, and them having won the game, which you know, that was Cam Ward. But yeah,
Definitely.
I think yeah, I love both, but yeah, definitely the more frustrating, again, like we talked about, man, is just there's so much less room for error, in college. So yeah, naturally, it's just more frustrating to watch the Canes. So.
No, definitely, definitely.
But yeah, brother, that is the AFC East discussion and preview, man. I think we hit all the highlights, man. Again, I think a division, man, that's really interesting for a lot of different reasons. And I'm really interested to see if anybody steps up and challenges the Bills, because again, like we talked about, they are the true cream of the crop in the division, and it's gonna be really interesting for me to see if the Dolphins can actually put up a fight, and what the Pats and Jets have to say about the division. Because even though I don't think they're going to win it, I think those guys are going to give some teams some headaches. I think
Yeah, I think
the
so too.
Bills and the Dolphins are going to have something to contend with those guys. Again, I think they're gonna be similar teams, in that they're going to be tough, they're going to be disciplined, and I think they're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to make a lot of mistakes, and again, just for those reasons, I think they're going to be a really tough out during the season.
I completely agree with you.
So yeah, man, that's it, brother. It was great to have you on again, man. Gotta do it again here soon. I'm sure we will. We gotta get with Steve, and see if we can all get together and do something, man, here in the very near future. I was definitely enjoyed getting on with those guys over at Finch Talk Sports Network, and talk some ball, and the East 10th Street Boys also, man. Those guys were a good time. So yeah, man. To my guy Steve who joined in, man. I appreciate it. To you, brother, thank you again for joining me. And let's get together here sometime next week, man, and see what we can put together.
You got it, my friend. Anytime.
All right, bro. So for everybody who joined in, for everybody who will watch later on, do us both a huge favor. Look up my guy Will, his 305 Sports Network or 305 Sports Now. I'm sorry, podcast. Look us both up on Twitter, YouTube, wherever you find your podcast, and like and subscribe. Tell all your friends and family about it, and join in whenever you guys get a chance, man. We love to have you. So for my boy Will, everybody have a good night, and I will talk to you guys really, really soon. Here it is.